It is a Waddy Wednesday.
Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Ryan O'Neill.
Glad to have with us Alfred State history professor Dr. Nick Waddy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. It's always an honor.
Dr. Waddy, I want to first get your thoughts on the Covington Catholic school kids out of Kentucky and that incident, which has gotten a lot of attention from both the left-wing and the right-wing media.
Yeah, it's really the perfect demonstration of the intolerance that has a steely grip on our culture at this point. You know, there are so many people waiting out there just coiled in readiness to express outrage, and you know they're waiting to express outrage about something that white conservatives do or say, and connected to Trump, of course. And it's pretty clear from the context of what happened between these high school students and the Native American gentleman and others at the scene that you know, it was a complex situation, and maybe some of these students could have handled themselves better. But you know, that video shows the Native American activist approaching the famous student, Catholic student, and banging a drum in his face, and how anyone took from that the child was harassing the adult is extraordinary to me. So I'm glad that some of the truth of this incident is coming out. It's very nice to see that President Trump expressed support for these students. But, you know, if there's a lesson here, I hope that we all think before we speak, and maybe try to understand the context of people's actions before we jump to the conclusion that they're monsters.
The liberal press was quick to jump on these kids. The apologies came quickly, though, from CNN's Jake Tapper once he saw the whole video, which showed the bullying of the Covington students, being called all kinds of horrible names. And the apologies also came from Meghan McCain, who originally condemned the kids, and then after she saw the second video that came out, she apologized and talked about how she was part of the rush to judgment. I noticed that the not the school system itself in Covington, Kentucky, but the Catholic diocese, the bishop's office in that diocese, came out and condemned the students. Now, interestingly, watching my Catholic college friends on Facebook and Twitter, they're all saying, did you notice that the media, the liberal media and the pundits are apologizing, but the bishop's office has yet to issue an apology for condemning the Covington kids, which does not surprise anybody from my era of Catholic school students. There was a low opinion of the bishops and their offices and the chancery offices when I was going to school, and it's just all kind of interesting, Dr. Waddy.
Well, I think when these things occur and the condemnations begin and the outrage gets cranking, there's such a momentum, and it seems to carry along virtually everyone. You know, there's immense pressure generated to join in the castigation of whoever is seen as the party in the wrong, and so often people do not take time to consider the full range of evidence and the context.
And that Nick Sandman kid, they doxed his name. They put his name out there, which is a rotten thing to do, considering that he didn't do anything except smile.
That's right. That's right. All you have to do is stand there and smile. Assuming you have a Trump hat on, you're guilty by definition. So yeah, it's extraordinary. And you know, people said some really vicious things about these kids, wishing death upon them. And you know that people are willing to go to this extent with so little information and attack children is, you know, it's a really ugly commentary on what our culture has become and what our nation has become.
Talking to Alfred State history professor Dr. Nick Waddy. I think that Nick Sandman kid handled himself really well in terms of not reacting to every rotten thing that was saying to him. You know what struck me about it? He grew up in the era where that everybody around you has cell phone video running, and it was just stay neutral, don't do anything, and don't do anything wrong, and don't lose your fuse, don't lose your cool, don't say anything stupid. He really did handle himself well, in spite of the fact that some of the liberal media came out. Some of these was BuzzFeed one of the bad ones on that one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they were in the lead. Yeah, I agree with you. He handled it reasonably well. We don't know exactly the circumstances surrounding how this older gentleman approached Nick Sandman, why Nick Sandman decided to stand there and smile. He seemed confused and uncomfortable, and that's what he said, and the video seems to bear that out. But you're right. The abuse that these students were taking from the other group at the scene was horrific and wholly inappropriate, and they handled that with a lot of grace and patience and self-control, and they certainly should be commended for that.
Well, Dr. Waddy, we found out this week from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that there are a dozen years left.
Right. Yeah, she's predicting, as she puts it, the end of the world based on climate change, and even the most aggressive climate change activists don't predict that the world is going to end. They do predict it's going to change. There are going to be challenges, but she's trying to generate as much angst as humanly possible. She's got this plan for dealing with climate change that involves, of course, a whole lot of socialism, and she's trying to get people on board with that. But she's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and she's excited to usher in a utopian socialist future for all of us. And let's just hope that she doesn't get her wish.
I want to bring up a topic that I brought up yesterday morning with Alfred University history professor Dr. Gary Ostrower. The Rudy Giuliani situation. Giuliani now the president's attorney. I agreed with Dr. Ostrower. If I was Trump, I might dump Rudy, only because it seems that Giuliani is no longer on top of his game in the statements that he makes and the retractions that Giuliani has to make. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he's definitely being one-upped by some people in the media, and that's not entirely surprising because everything he says is going to be parsed. They're going to throw a lot of hardball questions at him. They're going to try and trip him up. So if it's not Giuliani, it'll be someone else. I agree that he hasn't handled himself as well as he could. I think the president could benefit from better legal representation, better spokesman. The truth is that the case against him in terms of Russia collusion is a joke, and there's a much stronger case that he's been framed essentially by Democrats all along. That this is a sham. And he needs, good spokesman and good legal representation to make sure that view gets across. And maybe he can do better than Rudy Giuliani. I think you're right about that.
Talking to Alfred State history professor Dr. Nick Waddy. Dr. Waddy, the Supreme Court ruling from this week allowing Trump to temporarily enforce the transgender ban on allowing transgenders in the military. How long do you think that'll last?
Well, it's a good question. It'll probably work through the courts relatively quickly, and I wouldn't be surprised if next year the Supreme Court issued a definitive ruling. But, from my perspective, the issue is fairly simple. Democrats argue that even though we have laws on the books against sex discrimination. They argue that they can redefine sex and redefine gender as they please, and as usual, they believe that the law and the Constitution say whatever they want them to say, and that's just not the case. So I would think that a conservative court, an originalist court, could not but conclude that existing law does not protect transgender individuals, and if Democrats want to create such laws, they'll have to go through the lawmaking process.
Talking to Dr. Nick Waddy from Alfred State College today. Going to take a quick break. We'll come back, talk this day in history and some other issues. Stay with us.
A good night's sleep starts with the right pillow. That's where MyPillow comes in, and we're excited to announce the new 4-pack special. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the 4-pack special tab, and save 50% off the 4-pack, which includes 2 MyPillow premiums and 2 Go Anywhere pillows. Use promo code SKY at checkout or call 1-800-635-1825. That's 1-800-635-1825. Or go to MyPillow.com, click the 4-pack special tab, and use promo code SKY at checkout.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carroll. Rob, a lot warmer this morning, in the low 30s right now in our area.
Yeah, it's going to get even warmer as the day goes on, Brian. We got a storm that's going to pass west of the region. Initially, it'll send some warmer temperatures surging into the region, and then once the cold front goes by with the storm, temperatures are going to head in the opposite direction. So be careful. National Weather Service has us under a winter weather advisory through 3 p.m. A little bit of wet snow, sleet, and freezing rain trying to get in here this morning. As the day goes on and temperatures warm to 40 to 45, precipitation will change over to plain rain. Looks like we'll be dealing with rain tonight. Lows, they're going to have the tendency to drop down to about, I'd say, 30 to 35. So at some point tonight, Brian, the precipitation is going to switch over to snow, though accumulation should be under an inch. We're 30 to 35 for the nighttime low. Scattered snow showers and colder tomorrow, 35 in the morning. It'll drop in the afternoon. Snow showers could produce up to an inch of accumulation. Snow showers are in the forecast for tomorrow night. Lows will be 15 to 20. Cloudy, breezy Friday with scattered snow showers, cold 20 to 25. Brian, we're going to stay cold through the weekend. Sunrise this morning was at 7:31. Sunset tonight at 5:13.
Back with Alfred State History Professor Dr. Nick Waddy. Dr. Waddy, it was on this day in history in 1997 that Warren Christopher stepped down from the Secretary of State's job, and he was replaced by Madeleine Albright. Madeleine Albright was a face, as Warren Christopher was on TV a lot during the Clinton administration. Moving on to this day in history for the Vietnam War, 1973. President Nixon announces peace settlement was reached in Paris. Nixon and Henry Kissinger and the chief North Vietnamese negotiator got a peace agreement going in Paris to end the war and bring peace with honor. And Vietnam and Southeast Asia was the exact quotation. There was a lot of pressure on Nixon for years, and Johnson before that, to get out of that situation. You know, we had Dr. Ostrauer on once, and we were talking, Dr. Waddy, about Kennedy and Vietnam, and Kennedy had what they call advisors in Vietnam. Really, I think that was another way of just saying foot soldiers without saying it. Had Kennedy survived, do you think he would have pulled the troops out of Vietnam? Some people are mixed on that. Like Ostrauer says that there's some evidence. You know, well, I said to Ostrauer, I said that, you know, Kennedy had that statement about it's their war, they're the ones that have to win it. Ostrauer kind of doubted that Kennedy would have pulled out of Vietnam. What do you think?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think Kennedy was very excited about the possibilities for the U.S. Leading and conducting counterinsurgency operations. You know, he was a Cold War president. He would have known that if the communists had taken over in South Vietnam, that it would have been a bitter blow to his administration and could have precipitated his defeat in the 1964 election. So if he was going to leave South Vietnam, I certainly think he would have waited until after the election, but I think that's pretty unlikely. No one in their right mind, I think, would have foreseen and predicted that it would take hundreds of thousands of American troops to stave off the victory of the Viet Cong in South Vietnam. So I think it's very likely that, even if President Kennedy was inclined to budget our commitment to South Vietnam, I doubt very much he would have abandoned the country.
Talking with the Alfred State History Professor Dr. Nick Waddy, also on this date in history, and this would be in 1968, January 23rd, 1968, the U.S. intelligence ship, the Pueblo, was seized by North Korean naval vessels charged with spying and for violating North Korean territorial waters. There were 83 U.S. Military on the ship, and this went on for nearly a year, which the History Channel says hurt President Lyndon Johnson and his administration. Dr. Waddy, your thoughts on that incident, and also the whole incident that got the United States into the Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. That's one where Dr. Ostrower says that Johnson and the administration back in I believe 1964, lied and talking about the Gulf of Tonkin incident, both the Gulf of Tonkin and the Pueblo situations, Dr. Waddy.
Well, the Pueblo incident is very interesting because you would think ordinarily a country that attacks and takes over a U.S. naval vessel and holds in detention U.S. military personnel, you would think the United States would respond very aggressively in that sort of situation. But we didn't, largely, I think, because we were heavily committed to the Vietnam War and we didn't want to start another war on the Korean Peninsula. But I can understand why the American people would view that U.S. response to the Pueblo incident as weak and why that might have contributed to Richard Nixon's victory in 1968. As for the Gulf of Tonkin incident, there's still quite a bit of mystery that surrounds that, but I think there is evidence that whatever happened in the Gulf of Tonkin was exaggerated and exploited. But I think it's sort of irrelevant. The U.S. government had made a strategic decision that U.S. Military involvement on the ground, direct intervention in the fighting in South Vietnam was necessary to prevent a communist takeover of South Vietnam. And, was there some chicanery in convincing people to vote for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution? Maybe, but the vote in the Senate was so overwhelming, and the support for the Vietnam War by the American people was so strong initially that I don't think there was any doubt that we were going to get involved in the Vietnam War, and anticipated that it would be a lot easier than it turned out to be, and that's understandable. I think there's truth in what Dr. Ostrower suspects was the case in the Gulf of Tonkin, but U.S. involvement was inevitable.
Dr. Waddy, while you were talking, I Google searched President Johnson's name, and a lot of as you can imagine, pages and pages of Google responses come up. One of the things it says on Google is, what was President Johnson known for? And I can think of a friend of mine who would have a few funny answers for that. And what did Lyndon Johnson do as president? Again, this friend of mine would have some humorous answers there, and in a sarcastic way. President Johnson doesn't seem to be beloved by the liberals that I talk to, and definitely not the conservatives that I talk to. Why do you think that is, Dr. Waddy?
Well, I think his style was somewhat abrasive and politically incorrect, and that doesn't go over well in this day and age. But the truth is that Lyndon Johnson was one of the most consequential presidents in our history. He presided over a massive expansion of the government. He presided over the entrenchment of